Today we're going to be heading up to the arena and I'm going to be sharing with you 4 of the most transformative things I've learned over the last 10 or 15 years that have helped me advance my horsemanship to a whole new level. The bit or the Hackamore can be a point of reference for balance, for how that horse should be using their body. Overwhelming level of physical aids that are really unnecessary with our horses. And so the question is, well, if that's the problem, what's the answer? Usually when we think about asking our horse to move, our people go, okay, well, which leg do I put on and where do my hands need to be? And some of you guys, well, of course we ride with our seat, but do you lead with your seat? Now I'd go from this position to now, let's rein back and be here. And you see how that horse just engaged as soon as, for those of you guys that are new to the channel, my name's Colton Woods, and my whole focus here is to bring you guys real, raw horsemanship that gets you guys real results with your horses so that you can stay safe, you can have fun, and you can go achieve the goals and the dreams that you have with your horses. And if you've been here for a little bit of time or a long time, you guys can see I'm trying all sorts of new videos to help bring you guys the best content possible. And yes, that is Lizzie, our corgi. And so I want to encourage you guys to go ahead and use that comment section and let us know, what do you like? What is helpful? What sticks out to you in these videos? What are the big takeaways that you have? Because I read these comments, right? I read these comments and they help influence the types of videos we do, how I approach things, because as a horseman and as a business owner, I'm always learning. I'm always trying to find new ways to reach new people to help you guys in your horsemanship. And I know, I've been poking really hard, so hard that it's made some of these topics and these feelings a bit sore about the problems that we face in our industry. And one thing I'm gonna let you know is I'm not doing that today. That's not the style of today's video. We're going at it just to share with you guys some things that have really been a game changer for me and my horses. But I'm poking at those issues because we have to understand the why. We have to understand why these are big problems, because so many people have proven that they have wrapped up some of their identity in the style of their training, and we don't need to do that. When we know better, we do better, and we need to be willing to accept some better ways. I'm not saying that my way is the best way, I'm just saying it's the best way that I have found to work for me and my students. And I'm not here to cast stones and talk about people, I'm here to talk about problems. A lot of people have taken what I've said and gone, you're going after this person or this person or this person. It's not about the people, my friends. It's about the problems. Don't take anything personally. And if we learn to do that, man, life's a whole lot easier. That is where I'm coming from in these videos. But we're gonna go at it a little different today. We're in the arena, we're gonna get Johnny tacked up, and let's get into it. All right, y'all, so we're gonna get started with a pretty foundational concept. That way we can build on it throughout the video into that second, third, and fourth point I've got to share with you today. And where we're gonna start is one of the big things that all of us get stuck asking ourselves is, when is my horse ready to move on to that next phase in their education? And we oftentimes see this with horses that are in the foundation phase, and people are like, well, they're only 3 years old, they're only 4 years old, they're only 5 years old. And it's at some point, these horses do need to move on in their education, right? They cannot be green horses forever. And the big revolution that I had pretty early on, thankfully, in my career as a professional was green horses become broke horses when you ride green horses like broke horses, but you give them the grace that they need because they're green horses. All right, say that 10 times fast, right? And I'll go ahead and break this down for you really quickly, just in a very rudimentary fashion of like how you might start thinking about this and actually implementing it with your horses, because you guys have seen some videos, maybe this is the first time that you've come and you've seen the channel. And one of my biggest pet peeves in any of the industries, I don't care if it's Western, English, natural horsemanship, whatever it is getting people being entrenched and stuck within certain phases of a program, right? You should constantly be able to be improving and progressing. And so if we're riding a really green horse, early on, that grace period might be in steering, right? And if I'm steering this horse, I might allow this horse some grace before he actually gets his feet connected. And I really like the deal that I picked this up from Buck Brannaman, gosh, early on in the career, which is, and I'm not gonna directly quote him because I don't know if his opinion's changed on this, but early on in those green horses, we will give them a little bit of grace period of, say, like about 3 feet all the way around them, okay? And so 3 feet to the right, 3 feet to the left, 3 feet behind, 3 feet out in front. And so if I'm steering this horse, the horse has about 3 feet of wiggle room before my boundaries start to become way more firm. And when I take those green horses, a lot of times I tell my students, especially at the walk and even at the trot and then later on at the canter, ride your horses like you're on the edge of the Grand Canyon, right? And that means that you have to be very clear. If I'm riding my horse on the edge of the Grand Canyon and my Grand Canyon trail is just right here in front of me, then I'm gonna be very clear about, oh gosh, the trail turns, and my horse needs to be very clear about where they need to go, right? And if I gotta go around a big boulder right here, then I have to be very clear about where my boundaries are. That way, that horse can be safe. And when we're out here in the arena, we're basically riding on a treadmill. We're not going anywhere. So our horses need to get more soft, more supple, more confident, more relaxed, more understanding, more willing. And if we're more clear with these green horses about where the boundaries are, and we support them so that they can understand that. And I'm a very purpose-driven person. So you hear my students, I'll tell you guys, like, ride your horses like if you're just in an empty arena like we are today, chase imaginary cows, jump imaginary jumps, ride down the Grand Canyon, right? Go put some purpose to that. That way you have a clear line of, gosh, this is the limit. My horse has to stop by the time they get to this point. And if I'm on a green horse and I'm like, that's the limit of the trail, that's where we have to stop because that's where the cliff starts, then guess what I have to do with those green horses? I got to prepare a little bit more ahead. And then by the time I get there, if my horse isn't doing it, we got to get the job done. And then guess what? That's what we do with broke horses is we ask those horses, we prepare them, and then at some point the job has to get done. And when you start to give that horse grace, and then as that horse gets more experience, those grace periods shrink. And as they shrink, then the horse starts to exist right between your hands, right between your legs. That horse is not thinking or pushing further out than their nose. They're not behind the leg. They're not thinking or pushing behind them. They're not leaning or drifting left or right. They're right there between your legs to where basically their legs are our legs. And we can, as Tom Dorrance would say, take down a badger hole or up a telephone pole if we wanted to, but we wouldn't either do either one of those things, but we could if we wanted to, right? So with that being said, y'all, let's get on to step number 2. So as we get into the second thing that I want to share with you, one of the big issues, and all of these are tackling problems that I've personally faced and that many of us face with our horses, and it doesn't matter whether you're riding English horses, trail horses, Western horses, there's an element of unnecessary physical contact. And I'm not just saying contact in the face, but I'm talking about contact through the leg, contact through the reins, physical contact that is unnecessary. And there's a saying that one of my mentors has named Patrick King, which is, if it's not light, it's not right. And many of us, especially if you're here, all of us are striving to find a lighter way, a softer way to communicate with our horse, but also to get our horses to ride and be like. We don't want them to be heavy and stiff and to where we feel like we have to have a lot of physical contact. And on a rudimentary level, that shows up in certain instances where people are riding their horses and they're like, well, to get my horse to actually turn a direction, I need to take my inside rein. And I've already talked about in previous videos why constantly steering off the inside rein is an issue. And then there's other things of like, well, to get my horse to go, I've got to kick constantly to keep my horse going. And what I'm getting at is an overwhelming level of physical aids that are really unnecessary with our horses. And so the question is, well, if that's the problem, what's the answer, right? What is the answer to this? How do we overcome this? And the thing that I got taught, this is twofold. One, taught from Patrick King, one of my mentors, and also from going over to Portugal and riding some Lusitano stallions with my wife at the Valencia Riding School or Academy, is to lead with your seat, okay? To lead with your seat. And in that, I'm gonna show you a lateral maneuver of just asking this horse to move laterally, because I think it's one of the most dramatic and ways that makes it make sense, which is, usually when we think about asking our horse to move, our people go, okay, well, which leg do I put on and where do my hands need to be, right? Which leg do I put on where do my hands need to be? And some of you guys, well, of course we ride with our seat, but do you lead with your seat? Okay, so I'm gonna ask, when I ask this horse to move laterally, what I actually think about is I want my shoulders to stay balanced. I want my hips to stay balanced. Am I perfect at this? Absolutely not. I'm always a work in progress. Pick me apart. Have fun, right? But when I do this, what I strive for is to keep my hips balanced, my shoulders balanced. That way my horse can stay balanced through his body. And when I go to ask him to move laterally, I want to think about opening my seat in a straight lateral fashion, okay? So what I used to do in my lateral work, because I was starting a lot of colts and I was constantly pushing and driving horses around, is I'll be like, okay, Johnny, we're gonna laterally move to the left. And some of you guys will get this, and some of you guys are like, this is ugly and atrocious. And I'd go to drive that horse, his body and his rib cage off this way. And you guys see how I'm behind the motion, and this horse hasn't really been ridden that way because I've learned better. And he's like, what the hell is wrong with you, dude? Versus if I try to keep my shoulders and my hips in alignment and my spine in alignment with his spine, and I open my seat to the left here, and if he doesn't go, then I can drive him that direction. I try to open through my hips to ask this horse to move through, okay? So he is walking forward to you guys. I'm gonna back him up just a little bit. And I didn't warm him up on this, and this horse isn't, like, he's still learning and figuring this stuff out too. So if I open my seat to my right here, that I try to stay as balanced through my body as possible, okay? If I go back the other way. So I'm gonna help this horse find his point of balance with my hands, because that will help him stay more balanced. And so on the right side, what I feel that is, and it'd be easy for me to end up out here. Why? Because he's not as supple going to the left in that lateral maneuver. And what I would try to avoid is to end up behind the motion trying to drive him. I want to think about, where's that resistance? I can feel the resistance on this horse. It's in his left shoulder, right? It's in his left shoulder. So we're not gonna necessarily turn this into like a training session, but the big thing with this is being able to open with our seat, so that way the lightness can be there. And if the horse doesn't follow that open through the seat, that we can come in with our aids as early as we need to, so that way we can stay balanced and our horses can stay balanced up underneath us. So a few minutes ago, I mentioned that my wife and I went to Portugal and rode at Valencia Riding Academy with my friend Patrick King for a little bit. And probably the number one thing that I took away from there is what I'm about to share with you. And this absolutely changed the game, because in the English and the Western worlds here in the United States, one of the biggest and most misunderstood concepts is contact. And what is contact? How should contact be related to? How should it be felt? What should it feel like with our horses? And in the English world, right, there's a certain amount of contact that people expect to have in their hand, right? It might be 5 pounds, 7 pounds, 2 pounds, but there's an accepted amount of, you should feel contact in your hands, which means you should be getting blisters on the reins, basically, is what people are saying. And then in the Western world, a lot of times, the idea of contact is, we got some horses that are really over bridled. They don't feel like anything, okay? Their body is shaped, they're driving from behind and all these things, but they're not really, there's not much to be felt within the contact. And of course, there's gonna be people like, that's not true, that's not how it is over here. Listen, there's exceptions to the rules, but I'm generalizing here because that's the generalization that we run into within these industries and with these contacts. And so when we were in Portugal, I got to feel how horses rode that were classically trained. And one of the biggest thing that I took away from that is that within the contact, there is, by definition of reining, those horses are so willingly guided with little to no resistance. But the thing is that the horses in the contact, it is weightless. You cannot feel the horse there, but the horse is also not behind the bridle. They're not there. They are existing and they are present within the contact. The contact is supporting that horse. The horse is accepting of the contact, and that horse is exactly right where that contact has asked them to be. And you're like, well, what does that mean when the horse is right where the contact has asked them to be? Because the contact itself is a point of reference for the horse's balance. And that's what we're looking for. And so of course, with this particular horse, I got him in the Hackamore today, maybe looks a little different than your horse might be in the snaffle bit, but it's because of the headgear he's got on, but it's not any different, because the bit or the Hackamore can be a point of reference for balance, for how that horse should be using their body And what I strive for with my horses today is not for my horses to be over bridled and behind it to where I cannot feel them, because I feel like that's how you create a runoff. But I also do not want my horses to have a certain amount of physical weight in my hands perpetually, okay? Because that's heaviness, that's that horse being pulled onto the forehand, and that's resistance and all of those things that I do not want. So I don't want to have a certain amount of measurable weight in my reins, but I also need to know that I can feel my horse being present within the contact, so that way the horse can find that to be supportive all the way through. And over time, any of these horses can have that contact, can have relation to where that point of reference for balance is on a draped rein, right? If you're using certain types of equipment that allow you to start to ask these horses to find that point of reference for balance, but it's not off of the reins having a direct pull per se, or a direct feel, but they can be operating off of a rein that has some drape in it, because maybe that horse has the physical strength and the understanding to truly be self-collected, right? Self-collection is what we're going for. By the way, self-collection starts in the mind. We're not going to talk about that today, but it does. If your horse isn't self-collected in the mind, they're not going to be self-collected through the body. And so understanding the relation to contact and how it is felt with the horse, and that there should not be a certain amount of weight in our hands, but also that horse should not be there within the hands, is really, really, really important. And that forever changed the way that I train my horses and the feel that I try to develop within my horses, because I want my horses to understand that, yes, my hands are there to be helpful. They're there to be supportive of what I'm asking them to do. And in fact, I even use a 4-step process of focus, relax, understand, and balance. And that's how I train them through that. And so with that being said, let's move on to the next one. So one of my absolute favorite exercises with my horses for their mental, physical, emotional development is this right here. And it is what some might refer to as the rein back, others might refer to as the backup, okay? And today is like a Portugal day, I guess. I'm sharing a lot of tips with you guys from a trip that we took, because that trip really revolutionized a lot of how I ride my horses. And when we come into the rein back, I'm going to share with you exactly how I've changed my seat to help my horses better be able to engage through their body. But first, we have to understand, right? I'm pointing out the problems that we see, that I see at clinics and that I see with students, because you might be facing those with your own horse, whether you're aware of them before or not. We have to be aware of what are the things that are causing the issues that we're having, so that we can actually fix them, right? And when it comes in the rein back, there's a lot of times where you see people that are like, well, I teach my horse to back up by pulling on the reins. And that's not how we want to back our horses up, okay? And we don't want to be pulling on the reins. And other people think, well, I teach my horse to back up by kicking them in the shoulders, okay? And it's like, okay, that's not really how we want to teach them to back up, right? And other people may not kick them in the shoulders, they might use their leg on their belly. But the biggest issue I see with people is in how they use their seat, all right? And how they use their seat in the back of them. Well, most of the time, regardless whether you're pulling on the reins or using your feet, a lot of times when people go to back their horse up, they're sitting like this, and they go to ask that horse to back. What I want you to see is that my rear end is completely down in my saddle. Like I'm sitting in this saddle like I'm on the chase lounger in the couch, okay? I'm not in an active riding position. And most people, when they go to back their horses up, they're like, well, I just need the horse to come back underneath me, so I'm gonna sit here and ask that horse to do that. That's not what we want to do, because when a horse is truly backing up properly, a horse that truly backs up balanced is the first true steps of collection. Because horses back up in a trot, we want their hind end engaged, we want their shoulders elevated, we want their back rounded in the backup here. And so when we go to ask our horses to back, we need to be in an active riding position. And so one of the things that I changed about this, I would always be in an active riding position where I'm rolled up on the points of my pelvis. And I used to then be right here in an active riding position, and then I'd ask that horse to come back to me, okay? Now what I do, instead of doing that where I'm off the horse's back, okay? My feet are maybe an inch further forward than they would be if I was gonna ride the horse forward. But the number one change I made after coming back from Portugal was that from here, I would bring my shoulders back, and I'd tighten my core to where my core is engaged, and I'd go from this position to now let's rein back and be here. And you see how that horse just engaged as soon as I brought my shoulders back and engaged my core. And I didn't pull on my reins when I did that, okay? So if I ride him back forward here and then I stop and I bring my core back up under, like almost bring my belly button to my spine, you notice how this horse is then able to follow my body position and my intention and my energy back. And that is an absolute game changer. And it worked so freaking well that we were out in Portugal for like 10 days. I came home to a barn full of 12 training horses and I got on them and I was so mind blown by just taking my shoulders further back than I had been, like just like that I got on all of those horses that first day back at work. And I did that on all of them and every single one of them backed up better. Every single one of them. And it worked because it works for horses, right? It wasn't a matter of opinion. That was a factual piece of information that when we change our body position to be able to ask those horses to be able to follow us back in the rein back, to be able to follow that position, that they are able to activate and engage their body in a much more beneficial way, right? And I'm merely saying this for when we're practicing our backup with our horses, right? If you're gonna go down there and teach your horse to sliding stop, I am not telling you to sliding stop like this. You might end up in the dirt, right? You have to ride with functional equitation, but when you go to rein back, you can still practice on being able to bring, I think one of the most helpful things is to bring that belly button towards my spine and bring that motion back up underneath me. And because it helps horses. The proof is in the pudding if you go out there and you work with your horse on that, because you get up off their back and allow them to use themselves properly underneath you. And so that's where we're gonna wrap it up for today, guys. I want you to go down in the comments and tell me, out of these 4 things, which one are you gonna go out and try with your horse first? I know that they're super simple, but simple scales, fancy fails in business and with our horses. And making these simple changes have been absolutely profound on the results that we get with our horses here. And if you're wanting to go even deeper into the ins and the outs of how I do things with my horses through all the different maneuvers and different exercises and skills, you can always click that link down in the description to the Cavi community. You can try it completely free for a week. Guys, the people that join that's how we are able to keep doing these videos for free on YouTube to try to bring you guys as much value as possible. But in there, we've got the real raw training sessions. We've got step-by-step instructional videos. It's for those of you guys that are actually putting the work in with your horses and you want to go a level deeper and you want to get access to me to be able to help you with your horse. Be sure to check out the Cavi community. Until then, we'll see you next time.